DogWorks Radio is sponsored by Alaska Dog Works. Check out their website at alaskadogworks.com.
Hi guys, it's Alex. If you are a fan of sled dog sports in the Iditarod, Mushing Radio is the show for you. Each Wednesday we drop a new episode on DogWorks Radio, so be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts from.
Start your day tomorrow with The Daily Dog with Michelle Forto, the morning podcast on DogWorks Radio. Apple Podcast reviewer Patty Christensen calls it funny, smart, and filled with all the info I want to know about dogs. I love this show. Wake up with The Daily Dog, available on DogWorks Radio on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your shows.
Radio Free Palmer 89.5 KVRF presents Mushing Radio, hosted by Robert Forto. Mushing Radio is about dog-powered sports, living in the Great White North, and mushing. Visit our website at mushingradio.com. Here is your host, Robert Forto.
Hello and welcome, everybody. This is Robert Forto, and you're listening to Mushing Radio here on KVRF 89.7 in the Mat-Su Valley. You can find all of our episodes over on dogworksradio.com. Make sure you follow us over on social media, searching for the same name, DogWorks Radio, and we are talking about the 2018 Iditarod and the ceremonial start. And joining us from Anchorage is my co-host, Alex Stein. Alex, how's it going?
It's going great, Robert. It seems like we've had a very, very long run-up to Iditarod this year. In the past, it has seemed like it's been relatively quiet, but this year, as we've discussed many times, there's just been a lot happening in the off-season. And while all of those things are important to talk about them, it is great that the race is actually underway, or at least the ceremonial start happened. And the race itself will be underway shortly. So
you were down in Anchorage here for the ceremonial start. What's sort of the vibe? I know it's, as we talked about last night, it's always a huge party, and it looked like there was a big turnout. I was up here in Willow dealing with some clients out on our own tours, so it was fun for us as well. But what was the vibe down there at the ceremonial start?
You know, it was pretty much the same as it usually is, which is it's a big party. A lot of people come out. A lot of people come down to 4th Street. It did seem like the crowd was perhaps a little bit lighter than it had been in previous years, but not a lot lighter. There were a lot of people down there who are just excited to see the dogs run. A lot of tourists, as there always are, tons and tons of volunteers, and we've talked about many times how volunteers come on their own dime from all over the U.S. and actually all over the world in order to help out and work for the race. So that was all going on. There had been a very high-profile announcement that PETA was going to come and protest, and while they were there, the protest was very, very low key. They had several big stuffed huskies, and they had tombstones representing the dogs that have died during Iditarod in the past 5 years. Pretty much that was almost entirely ignored by everybody. And some people who were there said that they weren't even aware that PETA was there at all. So I'm not exactly sure. It seems like whatever PETA was trying to do was not aimed at the people who were here and was not aimed at people who are already Iditarod fans. Maybe they did it in order to get footage that they can use in ads or in fundraisers or something. But it was pretty much ignored. And there was actually someone from one of the fur stores who was handing out flyers right in front of them and sort of blocking anybody's view who was trying to take pictures of them. So it was as usual a big turnout, and people just seemed so excited. And of course, in addition to the 67 mushers who ran the 11-mile course yesterday, there were 67 Iditariders who are people who won auctions in order to be able to sit in the sled for those 11 miles. And there was just, as always, there was a lot of excitement and a ton of energy.
And there's always a little bit of a hubbub as it's going on. I guess for the second year in a row, Jeff King took a nice little spill, turning the corner down there towards Cordova Hill, and he made pretty much light of it on the news this evening. But things like that happen, don't they? It's just sort of part of the flair of the race. But it's still a dog team, and dog teams do what they want, don't they?
They really do. And Jeff's spill was kind of spectacular in that not only did he fall, but his Iditarider was completely dumped out of the sled. Jeff, to his credit, because Jeff King is a great dog musher and knows the rules, held on to his sled. So they managed to stop the team, get the Iditarider back in the bag on the sled, and keep going. But it was a pretty amazing spill that he took. And for people who are new or might not be as familiar, the race starts on 4th, and then it goes down, I don't know, 7 or 8 blocks or so, and then takes a big hard right turn on Cordova to go down a hill. And that has traditionally been a turn that maybe a turn that is hard to make. And every year there are a few people who spill or look like they're almost going to spill coming around that turn. So I guess it was Jeff's turn again.
So you had mentioned the folks from PETA were there protesting or making a stand, and there's always mushers there that are having their own sort of stands or causes that they're representing. I know I saw Monica Zappa with a huge flag banner for her Stand for Salmon initiative that she's been working on for the last couple of years. And then, of course, I saw Hugh Neff in his trademark Cat in the Hat hat. Did you see anything else like that down there? Anybody with banners or causes or any of the such that were made prominent?
Well, Monica's team. Monica was probably the biggest one, and there was a great picture, I believe, in the ADN of her in the woods, and a bunch of her supporters came out into the woods because the trail goes on city streets and then in the woods and ends up at Campbell Airfield Airstrip. And a bunch of her supporters were there in the woods, and they stopped and had this sort of mini support Stand for Salmon party in the woods as she was coming through, and it was just wonderful. I also saw Larry Dartrey, who has been a guest on Mushing Radio before, who's running Jason Campos' team. And even though Larry is an Alaskan and an American, he was carrying the Canadian flag in honor of Jason. So when Jason asked Larry to run his team for him, he basically said, think of this as your team and do whatever you want to do and don't even think of me. But Larry Dartrey wanted to honor Jason, so he had the Canadian flag in back of him. I did notice when mushers were heading out that there were a lot flags than usual. There's always been a few flags, but it seems like there were a lot of people carrying flags this year as they were heading out of the ceremonial start.
I remember a couple of years ago, Jeff King was out there sort of in an old-timey type musher's regalia. He had the old geese sled, and he was standing in front of it with a pole, and it had big furs on and a huge sled, and it was just really took you back. Was there anything like that this year? Occasionally there are some of those cooler stands or acknowledgments of things from the past.
I didn't see anything specifically like that, but there were, everyone had kind of their own approach this year. It struck me how, in a field of 67 mushers, there were 67 people who were completely and totally different.
Right.
Mishi, sorry, I always mispronounce his name, but Mishi Kono had a big Japanese flag behind him, and the crowd seemed to love that. And, that's the other thing about not only the ceremonial start, but also the restart in Willow. And I think maybe I can extend this to Iditarod fans in general. Everyone, I think, has their favorites, and they have people that they are particularly fond of or that they really want to root for. But it seems like there is so much of a feeling that all of the fans are rooting for everybody. And, if you think of football games or baseball games or basketball, people want one team to do well and don't really care about the other team. But it seems like everyone I've ever talked to who's a fan of sled dog racing, they want everyone to do well. And then they want their particular favorite to win. But more importantly, they want everyone to do well and everyone to have a good race. And that is something that I think is really unique among most major sports.
Right. So we have just a few more minutes left. I definitely want to talk about our featured musher of the day, but I also want to bring up something I saw on Facebook yesterday morning, very timely by Danny Seavey, wrote a very in-depth post on Facebook that really talked about sort of the stance of Iditarod. Did you read that, and can you comment briefly on your thoughts and feelings of that?
I did. It's a great post, and anyone interested in Iditarod should definitely seek it out, and I think we can put it up on our page as well. Asked a bunch of issues, but one of the things he was talking about is the whole idea of, is mushing humane, and do people overrun their dogs, or as PETA would say, run their dogs to death? And one of the suggestions that he had that I thought was absolutely fascinating, and I would love to see something like this implemented, is that when mushers leave checkpoints, traditionally some of the checkpoint volunteers, especially mushers who have rested for a while and the dogs have had a chance to have a rest, the volunteers will kind of lead the dogs out and dogs a little bit to get the dogs going. And his suggestion was that once the dogs are in place, the volunteers can't do anything, and the musher just has to get them going by voice command. And if for some reason the dogs aren't ready to go, which sometimes happens, that they would have to wait 4 hours before they would try again to get the dogs going. And his reasoning was that would make sure that people weren't sending the dogs out before they were actually ready to go out, and having the prospect of basically a 4-hour penalty would stop people from overrunning their dogs.
I thought that was an amazing example of a way a race could be changed for the positive. I know we talked about run-rest schedules just a couple of days ago here on Mushing Radio, but just to expand on what you said a little bit, he wants to see every checkpoint like a starting chute of the race. So you line up, they count down for 2 minutes or whatever, and then you take off. And if you do not take off, you pretty much turn your dogs around and have that 4-hour penalty. And then he expanded on it a little further and said the first time's 4 hours, the next time is 8-hour penalty, and the third time, if your dogs cannot go, is a DQ from the race. And that is a big-time penalty, but I think it would put everybody, sort of in the back of their mind on how that they would strategize their run-rest schedules, because if their dogs can go up to the line and not be willing to take off as they should, you can very quickly find yourself in not only an 8-hour hole, but a possible DQ just because you haven't rested your dogs enough. I think that's an excellent way to change the race for the positive.
And the other thing that sort of solidifies the need for the mushers to have great communications and great bonds with their dogs. And we've talked several times about sometimes mushers, especially mushers who have so-called leased teams where it's not their dogs, but the dogs belong to someone else who is basically renting them to the musher, and the musher doesn't maybe know the dogs as well, hasn't spent as much time with the dogs, and to a certain extent, the dogs don't trust the musher as much as they would with someone who had just spent much more time with them. So I think that would change the dynamics with leased teams a lot.
Right. I agree. So, yeah, we're going to share that article over on our Facebook page, DogWorks Radio. We'll do that today for you guys to read. And I highly suggest anybody that's really interested in Iditarod or sled dog sports in particular to give Danny Seavey a follow, because that guy there, he's got to be one of the better writers in terms of just sort of the armchair analysis of Iditarod. And by far, he is not, just an armchair fan. He has lived and breathed this sport his entire life with the Seavey family, and I believe he's ran the race a couple of times. So he's definitely, an expert in the field for sure. Okay, Alex, we have a few minutes left. Who are we talking about today for our musher profile?
So today we are talking about rookie Emily Maxwell. And Emily Maxwell is from Iowa City, and she is running her rookie race this year. And the way that she fell into mushing is kind of interesting. She had been working as a waitress in Iowa City and was going through the kitchen holding a tray and dropped the tray, and it spilled into a can of hot oil. And the hot oil spilled onto her, and she suffered second and third degree burns on 20% of her body, left arm, ear, neck, chest, stomach, and back. So this is a very, very serious and kind of widespread accident. And she was in the hospital for many, many weeks, and was covered in plastic wrap and had to have the burns scraped and soaked every day. And she said that kind of made her think about what she was doing and what she wanted to do with her life. In the aftermath of that, her marriage broke up, and she was kind of trying to decide what exactly she wanted to do, but knew that she wanted to make a change. And her brother said, well, let's go on this big hike and camping trip. And so they went up to Alaska, and I believe it was at the end of the trip, they were in a bar, and she went over to put money in the jukebox, and Nick Pettit was also in the bar and was kind of watching her, and they were perhaps flirting a little bit, and they both put money down on the pool table to play the next game of pool. They wound up playing pool against each other, and then they started talking about sled dogs and about what was, what Nick's life was like and what he was doing. He invited her to come back up and visit him and for a sled dog ride, and then she did that the following Thanksgiving, and as soon as she said, "This is what I want to do," and she didn't know exactly how that would look or what it would look like or how she would manage it, but she just packed up and moved to Alaska. She lived with Nick in a tent for a year, began helping out with his dogs, learning, the ins and outs of dog care and of sled dog racing, and then eventually started running some races, running some qualifiers. She and Nick did a doubles race on the Denali Highway where her sled was tied behind his, and they had 20 dogs and went over 200 miles. In 2016, she started entering qualifiers in a serious way, and now is both Nick's girlfriend and running the race for the first time on her own. And it's kind of amazing because she is, I believe, the first or second person from Iowa who's ever competed in Iditarod. And, although it does get cold in Iowa, it doesn't get to be 50 degrees below zero. And she said that it was very difficult learning how to adjust to the cold. She says you never really get used to it, but you learn how to handle it and adjust to it. Is saying that she said that one of the things that she's liked the most about this is that she's never really been a dog person, but in dealing with all of these dogs and getting to know these dogs on a daily and very intimate level, she's come to appreciate not only the bond between humans and dogs, but also the differences between a sled dog, who we've often talked about is basically a working dog, and your typical house pet dog. So this is a very exciting race for her, and I'm sure it's exciting for Nick to have her racing as well. So she'll be heading out from Sunday, and that it's just a very exciting thing to watch her and know that this race of hers and this new lifestyle of hers is not to get too philosophical, but it's a nice counterpoint to this horrible tragedy that happened that set all these events in motion.
First off, we are going to have Emily on our show shortly after the Iditarod is over. I reached out to her pretty much last week as everybody was in the middle of last-minute preparations to get ready for the race. And I asked her if she wanted to do a quick interview before the race, and she said, no, I'm in the middle of doing I believe it was vet checks or blood work or something for her dogs, but she said she would be happy to join us as soon as she finishes the race in Nome. So not only is she very excited to be on the trail, but she's also fully intending on finishing, and I think that's a very important note to make. And she has a heck of a dog team behind her, as many folks have known that listen to our show. Nick Pettit has just been burning up the trail this year. I believe he's won every race that he has entered this year, starting in January with the Connect 200 and so on and so forth. So he is rocking and rolling, and I'm sure Emily will do very well with her dog team as well. Alex, when you mentioned that is a very romantic view of how folks get into dog mushing. Not only is it sort of the romanticized view of mushing, but it's a very common way that people get involved with the sport, isn't it? They find out about the sport by doing something else. Sometimes it's a tragic accident or an illness or a lifestyle change, and the next thing you know, they're moving up to Alaska and getting involved with this sport. But they also find not only is it a romantic thing to be involved in, but it's a heck of a lot of hard work. As you mentioned with Emily, it was a 2 or 3 year process just to get where she is at today at the ceremonial start. Isn't that right? We've for people who are new to Iditarod or new to the podcast, it can take several concentrated years just to do your qualifiers in order to qualify for the race. So it's not like it was in the early days where you basically, mushers would vouch for people that they knew, and then those people could just enter the race. So there's learning about mushing. There's learning how to take care of dogs and how to drive a dog team, and then once that process is well underway, then you have to start doing your qualifiers. And as you know firsthand,
running races is a totally different beast than just going out and doing runs with your dogs.
Right, for sure. And of course, you're always at the mercy of the weather. I don't know how many times I have signed up for races well into October, and they fill up very quickly. And then here comes January, early February, and for one reason or another, a lot of times, not this year, but in years past, they've had to cancel some of those races. And if for folks that are trying to qualify for the Iditarod, if one or two of those races is canceled, it puts everything that you're doing back a year, and you just keep plugging away to get those qualifying miles in to do these big races like the Iditarod and, of course, the Yukon Quest. Alex, we are just about out of time. I know that you are planning on heading up to the restart in Willow tomorrow, and we will be back on the air tomorrow night, Sunday night, to talk about that. And I hope that we can get sort of our top 5 picks for the Iditarod. I know you and I talked about it at dinner the other day on who we thought was going to do very well. So maybe we can tell our friends and fans about our picks and who we look forward to seeing on the trail as well. And of course, we will have another musher profile of the evening. I do not know who that is yet. Alex springs them on me when we do the show, so it's always a surprise to me as well. Anything you want to say in closing, Alex, before we go?
I just want to say that I'm looking forward to making my predictions, and my predictions for Iditarod are always wrong.
Mine too. I don't think we would do very good in Vegas forecasting bets for Super Bowls and things like that. I think we'd be in the poorhouse relatively quickly.
Yes, definitely.
Very good. All right, Alex, enjoy yourself in Anchorage, and we'll talk again soon, okay?
Okay, thanks, Robert.
Thank you. On behalf of my co-host, this is Robert Forto for Mushing Radio. Make sure you check us out over on dogworksradio.com, and be sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play, or wherever you listen to your podcasts, and you will get our daily updates for the 2018 Iditarod right on your device. We will talk to you guys tomorrow. Goodbye.
Did you know that Alaska Dog Works trains service dogs for those in need throughout North America? Each and every service dog that is trained through the Lead Dog Service Dog Program and Michelle Forto and her team has an individual training plan. We train for autistic, mobility, psychiatric, and PTSD for our soldiers for service work. If you know of someone that may need a service dog, please take a moment and check out Alaska Dog Works on social media and at alaskadogworks.com.
If you like our podcast, there are a few things you can do. You can take a couple of minutes and go to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. You can also check out all of our DogWorks Radio sponsors and promotions in our show notes. Another thing you can do is go over to Facebook, like our Facebook page, and one last thing, please tell all of your friends by spreading the word about DogWorks Radio. Thank you so much for listening to us. We really appreciate you.
DogWorks Radio is produced by Robert Forto. Logo art by Angry Squirrel Studios. DogWorks Radio is produced in conjunction with KVRF 89.7 in Palmer, Alaska.
For dog training advice, you can contact Alaska Dog Works at 907-841-1686 or visit their website at alaskadogworks.com. If you have a show idea or would like to be a guest, please contact us by sending an email to live@dogworksradio.com.